Hello everybody, my name is David. Most of you probably know me as the Hunter Dag. Now I seem to be a series maker of some sort of renown. I make a decent series, yet most people don't watch it for reasons I'll explain later. Now I'm going to make this tutorial video on how to make a well put together series. Now I'm not going to show you most of the stuff like how to make a battle in the series because that seems to be the thing most people care about. But I'm basically going to talk about why you shouldn't care about that above all else, and what should be the important things in a series. So without further ado, let's move on to the actual tutorial. Before you even begin making your series, you should start some sort of planning on at least the aesthetic level. Now I'm sure most of you who would even care to make a series in the first place are spriters to some degree. So if you want to make a series, you should have some sprites made out to begin with. Excuse me. Now, what you should do is sort of plan what sprites you're going to use in your series, at least make a file of them. Excuse me once more. At least make a file of all the sprites you're going to use, compile them all together into a folder, attach their names to them, so you know what sprites are what their names are, etc., and you know when you're going to use each sprite. Now, also on the aesthetic planning level, you're going to want your sprites to be in some sort of environment. So here in my Sprite folder, I have a whole folder filled with backgrounds. At least before every episode you make, you should sort of plan out what environments your characters are going to be doing their actions in, and then you should get some pictures ready to use so you're not scrambling at the last second to get them, and also so it seems more like it's planned out. If you're just sort of deciding on what environments you're going to use as you're going there, you're really not putting much thought into your series if you're sort of going through it spontaneously. Alright? And last but not least, this is a concept I originally didn't use, and I really wish I did at first. The concept of text boxes. Now, for all of your characters, you should have some sort of text box for when they talk. Now, originally in my series, what I did is I had the characters talking entirely through speech bubbles. Now, as I'll show you in 1 second, let me get it open. Okay, if you look here, all the characters are talking through speech bubbles. Now, if you see this, the speech bubbles are going back and forth across the screen. Now, it's much more difficult to follow than, say, this situation right here, where all the speech bubbles are on top of the screen. So you attach a picture of the character to the text box, and then you also add text inside it manually. So you see what I did here is I have a JPEG file, or not a JPEG, an image file of some sort. I don't remember which kind, probably the default paint file, of the text box. I attach the character sprite into it and just sort of enlarge it a little bit so you can see what the character is. And also on top of that, what I did is I put a text box inside there. And if you look at me, I'm actually making motions with my hands that you can't see. But I made a text box inside this. I made a text box inside the visual text box. So the text box as in the item you can put into things. So it'll be like insert. Yeah, excuse me, no. It's up here somewhere in PowerPoint, which should be the program you're using to make it. Once again, I said, I'm assuming you know some of the basic things about this. So you have the text box, and what you should be doing is every time you're making a new slide, you should be having the exact same format of this text box here, this whole text box situation. So that way your text is always going to be in the same location. Now watch as I'm going through these. All the text is starting in the same spot of the box. Yet the box is clearly changing. And when you're making a new episode 2, what you should do is go into an episode you've already finished, copy this entire thing, right click, and then there's one of these options which is like copy it to the exact location. Yeah, use destination theme right there. So you should be using that to transfer your text boxes from thing to thing. So one part of the planning process is using text boxes like this. Make one for every character you plan on using, or at a minimum, make one for every character that's going to appear in the episode that you are currently making. Alright, now I'm going to move on to more of a planning on a story level, which is sort of the most important thing of this tutorial that I'm going to make. Now that I've finished talking about planning on the aesthetic level, now I'm going to talk about planning on the story level. Now, the first thing you should realize is that the most important part of any sort of interesting story is having some sort of conflict. Obviously, you're going to want to see something interesting happen that's some sort of problem because, people are sadistic in that sense. They like seeing other people's problems, but they also like seeing how people go about resolving them, which is the point of seeing any conflict in any story, really. But ultimately, when I see a lot of Sprite series, a lot of the really bad ones, the conflict really boils down to this. This is good guy. This is bad guy. See, look how he's all evil like that. Now, that's not necessarily the way to go about doing it. Of course, if you're doing it the right way, like I at least believe I'm doing, you should have a different bad guy other than the generic looks eviler than everyone else. Take, for example, one of the villains in my series, Melody. Now, look at her. She's green. She's bright. She's almost happy looking. She's made of a freaking Meloetta Sprite. That doesn't exactly scream evil, yet it doesn't fit into the evil uniform trope or something like that. Dress to evil, I think it's called. If you look through TV tropes, you might have seen that before. TV tropes is a good thing to look through, by the way, when you're planning this. So basically, you should give a reason for your bad guy to be evil. For example, in my series, the main villain or the antagonist, the ultimate antagonist is the Dark Spirit Forza, the ruler of the negative realm. Now, what he's doing is he is trying to take charge and wants to gain some sort of power over the neutral realm. But the reason why this is evil, not just because of the fact that he's doing some sort of conquest, it's the fact that blah, 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 blah. It's the fact that it has the capability of, if he offsets the balance between the realms, then it has the capability of completely destroying the world. All of reality as it is. So he's fueled by some sort of revenge. He doesn't want any help from anyone because he's hindered by his own pride. And that's what's making him evil. Some sort of character flaw rather than the natural tendency to be evil. Now I'm going to talk about the other villain, Melody here. Melody's main goal is to try to resurrect Vorza because she believes she's going to achieve some sort of power. Her entire life she's been going through a power struggle against everything that basically wants to oppose her. And then she develops some sort of complex, or superiority complex, I believe that's what it'd be called, where she constantly has the desire to have power, to gain more power, and to show off that power to other people. For example, take into consideration in episode 4 of my series when Melody describes pretty much her entire backstory. And the reason why this is good because it shows the relation between the villain and one of the main characters, but also it shows the relation between the villains. In this scene here, I'm basically going to paraphrase it. Melody knew who Necrotis was since she was young. Necrotis is one of the other villains in my series, which I'll talk about why it's successful in a moment. So she basically talks about her experience with Necrotis, what motivated her to start acting with all these forms of power, and etc. It makes complete sense, right? Now, if you go to episode 5, which I'm not going to really show you many of the clips from because I'm not going to just make you watch my series in this tutorial video. What happens in episode 5 to consider one of the other villains, Necrotis. Now, a reveal in episode 5, Necrotis is actually was a hero at one point and is now being inhabited by Necrotis was Core and is now being inhabited by Vorza. Core was a great hero, and in some sort of mishap, he accidentally killed a large number of people when his love interest was killed. So there we go. That gives some sort of motivation for him to be bad. And then in his time of weakness, Vorza shows up to him, and now Vorza has convinced him that he should take revenge on humanity for trying to convict him for killing the people, even though he was acting in his best interests. That gets deeper than this guy is bad, he's doing bad things, we should probably fight him. I'm the hero, and I should kill him. It goes beyond that. Alright? Okay, so the next topic I'm going to talk about in terms of series development is characters. Okay, now take a look at this screen I have organized here. Now, ignore the fact that multiple characters are repeated throughout it because I don't really have that many sprites on my computer because I'm only making a few at a time. Now, most of you have seen a Sprite series and have watched it to the end. Then again, come to think of it, most Sprite series makers don't tend to finish their series. A lot of the good ones end up stopping. Anyway, most of the Sprite series, near the end, this is what it becomes. The hero, which is it's the series maker's self-sprite, who happens to be insanely powerful for I don't know, the fact that the person making it has some sort of complex where they have to be the best thing in the world. Otherwise, it's not worth doing, empowering themselves, sort of like a childish thing to make yourself the best for absolutely no reason whatsoever. Okay, and eventually the hero in a lot of these bad series recruits a large number of other people to take part in his army, which it becomes by the end. Now, usually this is because within the spriting community, people say, oh, look, a Sprite series. I want to be a part of it. Here is my cell sprite. Use it in your series. Now, it's fine to include other people in your series. Personally, I don't like doing it because it takes away from my originality. I like thinking that my series is my own thing. And if I have other people in it, then it'll start detracting from that. But it's okay to have other people, but eventually it reaches a scene like this, where at the end, the hero is having a discussion with an entire army worth of people. All these are other spriters, and all of these characters are undeveloped because they just show up in the series for the sake of being in that person's series. You know what I mean? The characters need to all be developed, and the more characters you throw in there just for the sake of them having a fight scene to please someone else who isn't making the series, then what's the point of doing it? All it really does is hurt your series, when really you can spend more time fleshing out the few characters you actually have. Now for me, I try to keep as few characters as possible, even if they're just my characters. So like I have my self sprite here, and then let's see, I have Cairo, Sirius, Morella, and couple of other people who are, most of them aren't even here right now. I didn't fit them all in there. But I'm trying to keep the number of protagonists to a minimum. Right now, I only have 4. If you've been keeping up with my series, I'm not going to spoil it. One of them died. Not telling you who. Watch my series so you know what I mean. But the fewer characters you have, the more chance you have to develop their personality. Excuse me there. Now, like what I decided to do with mine is not take the childish approach of making your main character the strongest thing in the world just to please yourself. I decided to make my main character more of a background character who's the catalyst for everything that's happening. All the action seems to be revolving around my character, and he's sort of like the observer who's trying to make sense of everything, sort of playing the same role as the viewer would be. Like, what's going on? He asks questions, he's inquisitive, and so you sort of get into his head. And then also you have Cairo, the abandoned for most of his entire life, forced to live in the mountains with the god and having no interaction with the outside world. You have Sirius, who's like the dedicated prison worker who's all for his job, and sort of value of friendship between Sirius and Dag, more character development. And then there's Morella, who's probably one of my favorite characters that I've worked with, where she has a direct relation with one of the main antagonists, Melody here. And so you see, it develops her reaction. Her reactions develop her as a character, and also it develops Melody as a character. You sort of learn Melody's mindset through her interactions with her sister, and that's going to be explored a little bit more in some of the future episodes that I'm working on. So you should be able to tell characters' personalities and their backstories. Like, why should you care about this character other than, hey, that's my sprite, or hey, that's whoever's sprite. This is why I should care about it. So really limit your number of characters so you can have your characters blossom into these interesting creatures that you want people to care about. Like if you watch a series and you constantly ask yourself, why do I care about this character? Or, oh look, my character, cool. Then is it really a good series if all that's happening is you're concerned about what your character is doing? You should be concerned about the story that someone's creating with their series, right? Okay, now I'm going to move on to another topic. Okay, now I'm sort of going to be on the same picture here again, but I'm going to sort of discuss exposition, building tension. All right, the first rule that I don't want to see any of you guys break when you're making your Sprite series is to have no question in your mind whatsoever that the heroes are going to succeed. Basically what I'm saying is, ultimately you probably want to have a happy ending, but throughout the series you shouldn't be constantly reminded that, oh, the good guys are powerful. Take, for example, the existence of forms. All right. So consider that this is my main character here, right? Now he's in a battle. Now usually I'm against having battles in general, but let's just say I'm having a battle, and he's battling against. Let's say he's battling against the main bad guy here, right? So main bad guy kills him. Blah 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 blah. He is brought down to his death and then replaced with another form. Turns into another form. He's like, oh, I didn't know the hero had that form. Okay. And then eventually, now it's good every once in a while, maybe if you want to have some sort of last ditch effort to win. But if the second form is clearly more powerful than the first form, and you never convinced that the hero is going to die because they're going to turn into another form, then what's the point? If changing into another form becomes the pattern in your series, every time you fight, the hero gets killed and then just turns to a second form. You're like, oh, okay, hero's going to win. Yeah, obviously, it's not going to build any sort of tension if you're definitely convinced that the hero's going to kill this. Even if they spend the entire series saying, this bad guy is really freaking evil and he's going to kill everybody. Yeah, but the hero has 50 forms. Why should I care about it? You know what I mean? Alright. Secondly, the number of characters again. If you're met with seeing an end of the series with this sort of situation, the hero is standing on one side of the screen and his entire army of Spriters, usually what it ends up being, is facing him. And he's like, okay, we're going to attack the enemy now. Now, I'm sure any reasonable viewer is not going to say, how are they going to defeat him? It's like, yeah, we got a bunch of good guys. We're going to kill them all. So why should you care about what's going to happen? Just because you want to see a Sprite battle? Which, once again, your series should not be about the battles. It should be about what happens between them. The battle should be some sort of climax to the action. Now, in terms of exposition, every series should have at least one episode where it's basically just exposition up the ass. For example, episode 4 in my series is sort of where that started happening. I mean, first you get the exposition where it's entirely Melody's backstory. Now, that's interesting enough. Now, consider one of the other episodes in my series, episode 5, which I'm going to show you in a second if it shows up. Episode 5 is when, in my series, where the main protagonists are talking to the gods of sorts. Now, throughout this entire episode here, very little motion occurs whatsoever, because what's happening is the three god creatures, I'm not going to discuss all the details, they're talking to the heroes, explaining the importance of the plot, explaining what's happening, and then at some point they even describe what happened beforehand that led to this plot. So here's what happened back then, why it's interesting. Here's how it evolved into what is currently happening. Here's why you should care about what's currently happening. And finally, here's what you should do to try to stop it. Now, still, I haven't gotten to the point in my series where I describe what you should do. Eventually, if you want a good ending in your series, you should eventually decide on what is going to happen and how your heroes are going to eventually overcome this evil. You know what I mean? But you shouldn't reveal your hand early. You should give the heroes some sort of objective to try to stop the evil, but you shouldn't make them succeed explicitly on that. So what if you notice throughout my entire series, if you've watched it at all, once again, you're constantly questioning whether or not the heroes are going to succeed. Every time they think they're going to achieve something, the bad guy comes and totally screws everything up. Now, this situation is sort of like a Diabolus Ex Machina. Now, if you've heard of Deus Ex Machina, it's when help comes from nowhere to save the day. This is sort of like the opposite effect, where evil comes from nowhere and screws everything up. Now, it's much better when it gives some sort of context. Now, take, for example, in episode 6 of my series. Now, if you haven't watched it, I apologize if I'm spoiling something. What happens is the heroes finally get something, but Melody comes out and screws everything up. Now, this is directly related to a conversation that she had with Morella earlier in the series. So it's not even Diabolus Ex Machina. It's actually something that should have happened. The heroes were dreading the fact that it might happen, and then when it does happen, you see the fallout of it. So, it builds that you get a false sense of hope, making yourself care, going, yeah, the heroes are finally succeeding. Oh no! I care because the heroes that you just connected to earlier in the episode, by the way, something bad happened to them. Goodness. You know what I mean? All right. And then the final thing I'm going to talk about in terms of exposition and caring about what's going to happen is another thing that you shouldn't have happen in your series too often, if at all. Now, take, for example, again, the bad guy and the good guy are fighting. Bad guy attacks. Good guy is at, the end of his leg here. He's like, oh no, I'm going to die now. There's no hope. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, here comes in the friend who's, super powerful and goes, blah! Oh no, I've been defeated. I will retreat. Yeah, okay. So, bad guy retreats. Thanks, you saved me. Yeah, this is sort of like the same effect as having multiple forms. When your character, you're not convinced that they're going to die, if every time the heroes are about to die, someone else comes in and saves their ass from, I don't know why. Just for the fact that they happen to be there, or what now, the worst possible way to do that is that's how you introduce another spriter into your series. Now, if you're using another spriter, yeah, I'm sort of against that in general, go for it. But if you're like, oh no, I'm going to lose. Ha ha, I'm bad. Oh, hey, I killed you. Oh no. Who's this spriter? I just happened to be in the neighborhood. It's garbage. Please don't do that. If throughout all of my rambling, the only thing you get out of it is make tension, make the viewers care about it, then I've done my job here. All right? So, bottom line throughout this whole tutorial here is I'm not stopping it. Bottom line is, essentially, anyone can make a sprite, right? Now, fewer people can do that in the context of making a sprite battle. Now, I can't really do that myself, and I choose not to for plot reasons because I'm more of a plot-driven story, but you get the picture. Even fewer people than that can put that sprite battle in the context of this series. Now, often the series ends up being an excuse plot where it's like, oh, bad guy, let's kill them. Bunch of sprite battles along the way. And then the few, the proud, the great are the ones who can actually put all of this together in the context of a well-made, well-thought-out series. You know what I mean? Thank you for watching. My final word of advice that I'll give you is plan out your series pretty much beforehand. Don't be spontaneous. Don't let other people control your creative, don't let other people control the creativity of your series just to please them. Make a series that you think is good, yet make sure it actually is good. Make sure it's good for the right reasons, not because you're pleasing yourself, making yourself look good. Just do it to create a well flushed out story. Make a good story. And when you're convinced that you've written something that is riveting, engaging, and you'd watch it yourself even, then that's when you've made a good series. Now, in terms of battles, I said I can't really help you much in that regard. But in terms of all the planning, take all this advice I'm giving you, all right? Thank you. This has been David. I hope I helped someone. If you please make a Sprite series using some of my advice here. I want to see more good Sprite series instead of the whole Deus Ex Machina up the ass series that are everywhere out there. Alright? Peace out, guys. I will see you maybe in another tutorial video.